Hola, bienvenidos. Welcome back to Mija, let me tell you. This is Ana Rosa.
Dayana.
And again, we wanted to send out a heartfelt thank you from the Mija, let me tell you team for all your support and all your encouragement during our podcast journey.
Oh, mil gracias por su apoyo, sus mensajes en privado que nos han mandado. Estamos muy agradecidos. Voy a comenzar con esta experiencia. Cuando tú llegas a este país, bueno, dejas a tu pueblo y llegas a un país nuevo y tratas de reconectarte con tus raíces de la manera posible. Obviamente en 1996 el Internet no era el mismo que hoy ahorita existe, pero gracias a esa evolución del Internet, de las páginas de los guerreros, y ahorita está el tiempo de el reconocimiento de las reinas que van a estar representando a nuestro pueblo en las fiestas del 16 de septiembre. Y solamente reconocer que para muchos que dejamos nuestra tierra y llegamos a este país, esa reconexión con nuestras raíces nos llena de vida. Hay algunos que podemos viajar, ir y venir a los guerreros, a nuestro lugar de origen, donde quiera que sea que esté. Y hay maneras de vivir esa conexión de otra manera para los que no pueden viajar en ese tiempo o definitivamente por sus circunstancias no pueden viajar. Entonces, sí me gustaría reconocer el trabajo y la dedicación del comité, del equipo que transmiten estos eventos en vivo para que personas como nosotros que tal vez no podemos viajar en ese tiempo o no es posible, podamos vivir nuestras raíces y nuestras tradiciones y disfrutar de un pedacito de los guerreros, de nuestra cultura, aún estando miles de millas a distancia. Entonces, un agradecimiento profundo a todos los equipos que hacen eso posible. Sabemos el nivel de coordinación, organización que se lleva y estamos muy agradecidos de que puedan compartir con nosotros estas memorias, porque estas son memorias que podemos disfrutar en familia y que es algo que nos llena mucho de alegría el poder hacerlo y compartir con nuestros hijos, platicar de qué son estas costumbres, porque recuerden, nuestros hijos están viviendo en dos mundos, en el mundo de nuestra cultura y en un mundo que es muy diferente, y es el mundo del cual tratamos de platicar y transmitir aquí en este podcast, esta
Ujú.
transición de México aquí y qué es lo que disfrutamos y añoramos de nuestras raíces. Al mismo tiempo que estamos descubriendo raíces, tenemos que adaptarnos porque estamos en otro país.
Just a quick translation. We're giving a heartfelt thank you to the hardworking committee in Los Guerrero who transmit a lot of the fiestas and a lot of the events, cultural events that go on in Los Guerrero to keep us connected to our native land. We enjoy watching all the videos of all like the Independence Day, the parades, and we really appreciate all the work that goes into it because it really allows us to stay connected and teach the generation that is growing up here about their roots and about where we come from and keeping our cultural heritage alive. So we wanted to give them a shout out and a thank you because your work does matter. Lo que hacen sí importa y sí nos ayuda a estar más conectados con nuestras raíces y recordar de dónde venimos. All right. So for the topic of today, we wanted to tell stories about what we remember about our early days here in the US. And I'll have mi coma start. And also, real quick, I realize I call her coma and she calls me coma. And for people who might not know what that means, just really quick, when someone asks you to be the godmother or godfather of their child, whether it be for baptism, communion, any of those events, then once you have become their godparent, it's customary in Mexico for them to call you comadre or compadre, or coma for short or compa for short. And mi coma Diana and mi compa Manuel so graciously asked me and my compa Jose to be the grandparents of Aaliyah, their oldest daughter, for their baptism, which is why she is my coma now, and vice versa. I don't know if I explained that right, but
Yes, that sounds good to me. We'll pick up where we left off.
hmm
So I'll kind of recap a little bit de lo que sucedió when we got here. Ana, I think we left off where we had arrived on a bus, and we believe it was Santa Maria. We don't recall exactly donde era, pero Santa Maria, we'll just say for the record, Santa Maria. Because I remember someone picked us up from the bus depot and brought us to mi tío Yello's house. And so I remember waking up the next day and being in a ranch setting. That's where mi tío Yello lived. And everything was gone in terms of, you woke up, you hear your familiar noises in Mexico, or el gas, or things like that, right? La propaganda de la pomada, and all those things. Y aquí, everything was quiet, and it was a ranch setting, so we didn't have neighbors nearby. And I remember we didn't enroll into school right away because there's, processes to be followed that we were learning about, and my parents were learning, and then finally enrolled us not too long, probably a couple months without attending school. And then they enrolled us. And I remember my first day of school, and I will never forget seeing the yellow bus from the school, el transporte de la escuela en un autobús amarillo. And this was because we lived on 246, where the big pine trees are. If you live here in the San Ynez Valley, the stretch of the pine trees, which I hear people from our area, ya, no sé, del Tepehuaje, de San Martín, de los Guerreros, de los alrededores, they planted them. That's what I hear. I don't know si alguien puede confirmar esa historia, pues nos puede ayudar un poquito en decir quién los plantó, pero eso me han dicho y me gusta, digamos, pensar que fue así, porque estos árboles tienen muchos años plantados allí y es como what we were talking about before last time we had our podcast, and was that las raíces, who came first to this area. And so that talks about the impact, not only of the people who came, but like the physical impact, right? The visual impact of the things that they were able to get done through their work. I remember the bus arriving, and it was my first time going on a bus. Y el bus took us on a route and back to what used to be Hanada School, or still is Hanada School. But back in the day, it was a K through 8th. Now, currently in 2025, and I don't know when they officially opened, but they opened Oak Valley, which was the elementary school, and then Hanada became the junior high, middle school. And so back in the day, it was all K through 8th grade, todos allí, desde chiquitos hasta grandes. And I remember getting off the bus and going into the office. The office still lies in the same place. And nos fuimos a la oficina. I checked in, and they walked me to my classroom. So tenía 8 años. I was 8 years old, so I was in 3rd grade. And me acuerdo que eran unos portables. Todavía están allí, pero ya están bajo otro servicio. Ya no son parte de la escuela, ya son parte del centro recreativo, the recreation center there in Buellton Rec. But I remember that side was like kind of like the smaller kids area. We had a playground, we had the portables, but they were fairly new. And the reason I feel they were fairly new is they opened the door to the classroom. The first smell that I remember, and whenever I go to any place that they have put new alfombra, okay, the smell of new alfombra, and it just takes me back to my first day of school. And so I remember they introduced me to the teacher, Miss Young, y ella tenía un pelo rizado, mucho pelo rizado, y me pareció muy amable. No le entendí nada, ¿verdad? Porque pues obvio en inglés, yo en español, y ella, pero con su sonrisa me dijo todo. Entonces, eso habla de que puedes traspasar lenguaje, mientras que tú eres amable, eres empática, estás dispuesta a escuchar. Entonces, eso habla mucho de esa experiencia. Ella fue una maestra muy buena, me acogió en su salón, me hizo parte de su salón, Y recuerdo que en sus lecciones, no sé si ustedes están familiares con las caricaturas de Charlie Brown, ¿verdad? Vamos a poner aquí a lo mejor algo que indique, que se llama Peanut, ¿verdad? Pero es Charlie Brown. Y me acuerdo que tenían una maestra en ese show, en esa caricatura, que hablaba, pero nunca se le entendía qué decía. No se oía papá, 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 pero se oía solamente su voz, pero sin palabras, era un sonido único. Y
Ujú,
así, no que así sonaba la maestra, ¿verdad? Pero así me identifico, escuchaba lo que tenía que decir, pero no le entendía nada. Y había unos alumnos que me ayudaban a traducir. Entonces, yo me confié en muchos de esos compañeros de clase que me ayudaban a traducir. I will kind of recap in English. I remember they walked me to the classroom, and I will never forget the smell that hit me first because there were portables, and I think they were newly built portables because I could smell the smell of freshly installed ¿cómo se dice? En inglés,
carpet?
carpet. So whenever
Mhm,
I go to a new place where they've installed carpet and it smells the strong smell of carpet that's recently being installed, it really transports me to the time for my first day in in school.
mhm,
And the teacher was very welcoming, Miss Young. She had
mhm,
lots of curly hair, and I remember I didn't understand anything she was saying, but I remember she had a great big smile, and that made me feel so comfortable being in her classroom. And
mhm,
I know you might be familiar with the Peanuts cartoon where there's a teacher there whenever they showcase the classroom and the kids in the classroom that you hear that teacher that you can't really understand what she's saying, but there's a distinct sound that she makes which prompts us to think that she's talking to the kids, but you don't understand anything
mhm.
that they're saying to them. That was me. I felt lost, right? But there were classmates that were very friendly and they would translate for me. So I really trusted them that they were telling me the right thing and not just telling me what they wanted me to do. I didn't get in trouble, so I like to think that they were honest in that translation process. And that was like my first day, and just kind of like classroom, the smells of a new classroom carpet. Pretty soon I was introduced to a class. We had a teacher, Miss Stacy, and Miss Stacy, even though her name sounds, not in Spanish, she was our Spanish teacher. So every so often, I think once a day for like 30 minutes, I don't recall how many times a week I would go to her classroom, but that was
Mhm,
my safe place. That's what I looked forward to because there in that classroom, everybody spoke Spanish and I felt at home. Me
mhm,
sentía en casa hearing everybody speak Spanish. And I
mhm,
think that really helped me in that transition to school that yes, there was partially a classroom where I didn't understand and I didn't feel like I fit in because I didn't know what most of it was talked about, but partially I would be taken out for this period of time to be able to interact with students who spoke Spanish, and for me that was like the best thing ever. And I think that
mhm,
allowed me that resiliency to say, yeah, you go to a classroom that is tough, that you don't understand what they're talking about. But guess what? There is a space here in this school that is that you can be yourself, you can understand, you can talk, and people felt like they belong. And not saying that I didn't belong in the classroom because they were very friendly, but I just felt like I couldn't understand and I felt out of place, and that was like I don't know. I don't know what to do. Yeah, I had to wait for instructions for translation to even be able to do the things that the teacher wanted me to do.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. And
Mm.
I just real quick, I think I had Mrs. Young later on as I think in third grade, I think we would go out for math groups, and she wasn't my main teacher, but she was my math teacher. She still remembered you. I'm sure you made an impact in her life too.
I think it's beautiful. I remember she really liked collecting feathers. And I remember that we lived in the ranch, and really close to the ranch, there's ostrich farm. And I don't know if the wind blew the feathers that way because one day I found a feather, and it didn't look like a feather from a bird from a tree. As a student, you really appreciate your teachers and you find ways to kind of like, you take them a little flower, a little pencil. And I remember she collected feathers or she liked that kind of nature collectibles. And so I put it in a bag and I took it to her. And that was kind of like my
Mm,
way, even though I couldn't communicate with her, to say thank you, gracias. Thank you for being that teacher, that guide. Welcome me into my first experience in a classroom here in the United States. Obviously, maybe I wasn't that deep of a thinking of that level, but in my own way as a child, presenting her with like something that I knew she enjoyed was saying thank you to her.
mm,
And there were
mhm,
tough times. My first experience with standardized tests in the
mm,
United States was interesting. Obviously, it was my a few months since I arrived to school, so my English wasn't as developed to understand not only what was on the test, pero cómo llenar the little burbujitas on the paper. I don't feel like I had that exposure in Mexico on my schooling that we did the standardized tests with a little scantron and they presented me with the exam and the scan sheet, and I would look around, not that I was copying, but looking around like, what are the other students doing? Like, oh, they're filling out the bubbles. Okay, I'm gonna open this. The instructions in English, and I'm pretty sure I didn't do very well in that test. But
mm,
it was like a first exposure of the type of testing that took place here. So that one wasn't maybe not a fondest because I felt at a loss. Yeah, it was a learning opportunity. Okay, there's tests and you fill out the bubbles. And of course, later on, we learn Scantron's work and things like that. But in that
mhm,
time, it was just like, what are my other peers doing? Well, I see them opening the book and they're obviously reading and they understand. And for me,
mhm.
it's like gibberish because I don't understand anything in the pages. Okay, but I'll fill out the bubbles so I just randomly filled bubbles up, and that was that experience.
Did you ever have to get pulled out? Like once you knew English better, like I remember I was exposed to English younger. So preschool I was exposed to English, even though Spanish, we only spoke Spanish at home. My parents believed strongly in speaking only Spanish at home, and you could be exposed to English at school. So I remember getting exposed to English at a younger age, but when I got to, I feel like first or second grade, I would still get pulled out for English proficiency tests. I remember we would be doing an activity and I'd be with the rest of my peers, and then someone would come pick us up and pull us out, and we would take these English tests. And I think once you passed it, you didn't have to get pulled out anymore. But I remember also kind of feeling a little bit of like, oh, I'm the only one that's getting pulled out. Like my peers are staying in the classroom and doing their activity, and I have to go somewhere else and miss this activity and get tested. So I think that was a first exposure for me where I'm getting pulled out for a reason that my peers are not getting pulled out. Do you remember anything of that?
Yes, I remember being pulled out at Hanada school and for the test, and it was I don't know if it was like a storage space. I don't know. This is my recollection. Maybe it wasn't a storage space, but it looked like somewhere private that they obviously when they were testing you, you had to have quiet space. And maybe that
Mm-hmm.
was the space that they used at that time. And I remember going there, and there was like a recorder, test materials that they used to test you. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a prompter, right? The person who's gonna be administrating this test so that they can assess your language proficiency. And so it was I felt different, right? Because it's like you said, I'm pretty much the only one. Maybe a few of the students in my generation when I came here, there was a lot more that they pulled out, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
all the students, and so that process was different, an added experience that other students may not have had in school.
Mm-hmm. I think that test that I got pulled for is, I think it's the LPAC. And I don't know if that's what it was called then, but it's like a form of testing for Spanish speaking students. And as an adult, after I graduated from undergrad, when my gap year, I became an LPAC tester. So I sat on the other side of the desk, if you will, And I remember going in thinking, I want to be a calm space for these students because when you do go into a testing situation like that and you do not know the language, you don't know who this person is. I just remember feeling kind of nervous when I was younger and kind of trying to step into the students' shoes. And I remember speaking to them in Spanish and just trying to make them feel comfortable when I was the LPAC tester. Just a quick kind of like full round circle for me where I got tested and then I became the tester and going in with the mindset of trying to be more empathetic for these students and trying to be a safe space for them. I feel like when I got pulled out at school, the person that pulled me out was also very kind, also spoke Spanish. So I wanted to kind of carry that over too.
It's wonderful that you were able to be that space for the students and really understand and stand in their shoes of what
Hmm.
that felt like for you, and just being conscious that it might be a new experience for these students like it was for us, and understanding what they had to come from, even though it might not be the same thing that we went through, and at different
Hmm.
times, obviously us years ago and then fairly recent, but just being that present, that
Hmm.
like we said, like you don't even have to speak the language to be that present. I had Miss Young, and you were that person for those students, and it just comes to show how important it is to be able to be empathetic, place ourselves in the shoes of others, and really understand that experience. And not that we are going to fully understand 100%, but just say, I see you, and I
Hmm.
see the path that you're walking, and I understand it's not an easy path, but you are here, and I am
Hmm.
here to walk with you. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons we chose the careers that we chose, because we
Hmm.
want to be that support for others, like others were for us. Thank you, Coma, for sharing that experience. Our family was finally able to find a place to live, and my parents moved to Lompoc within our first school year. And so they really had to think things through, and they didn't want to pull my brothers, Jose and myself, out from the school in the middle of the school year. They moved, and we stayed with my aunt and uncle, mi tiya y mi tia Gina, for the remainder of the school year. And we would go back and forth. We shared home. During the week, we were at their home in Buellton. We caught the bus. We went to school. And on Fridays afternoons, my dad used to commute from Lubbock to the ranch where he worked, and he would take us. We spend the weekend with our parents, and then Monday morning we would come back, and he would wake up early. He started his day, we probably left Lompoc at 6 in the morning, and we probably got up at 5:30 at the latest, probably, to get ready and get in the car and drive back with him. And so we did that for just a few months. But I remember getting up, and that Monday came, like, oh man, it starts
Yeah.
all over. And then Friday came, we would come back. And of course, we were happy to go home and visit our parents and be with our family. And then when we were at my aunts and uncles, they really took that part. They were our second parents. They took responsibility for us, and mi tía Yeye would peinarme, and mi tía Gina would make food. And I remember mi tía Gina making lunches sometimes when we were going on paseos, and they were there for us during this period of time, and we're always going to be grateful to them for that, for being
Hmm.
that safe space. And the reason I think that my parents did that is because there was already a lot of transitions, right? We transitioned from Mexico here. They started a new school year. Now we moved to another city. So they kind of wanted to give us some consistency, and that was what they felt was right for us, to
Hmm.
finish our school year here before moving to Lompoc. So that was kind of like our ending of the first year cycle here at the US, adapting, learning about the school system, but also about like the new foods. I'm gonna kind of like regress a little bit, but I remember when we were all together living at mi tía Jesus and mi tía Gina's house, they were very kind, and they would try to expose us to things that were available. And obviously, back in the day, there was no estaba la Albertsons, right? Albertsons wasn't built, and Buellton looked a lot more different than it does now. And so I remember Antonio's Pizza. I know they're not around anymore, but back in the day, they took us to Antonio's, our first pizza experience. Anyone who grew up in the San Ynez Valley has exposure to Antonio's Pizza, and you either went there. I remember we went there sometimes when we got off of high school earlier. We went to grab some pizza, or they had this little space in the back where you can hold like small family parties, and they had maquinitas, and you can play. You gotta understand that when we were in Mexico, pizza wasn't as popular as it is now. Ahorita, like, hay muchas pizzerías, ya es muy común. Pero back in the day, no era tan común. And so when we came into Antonio's, and I remember they ordered, I think, the family meal that they had, like they had the spaghetti and then the pizzas. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember looking at the pizza and I was like, we're used to like other type of cheese, queso fresco, and then you put it on top of stuff. And this was like cheese, but it was like mozzarella or whatever kind of cheeses they use. And it was a piece of bread, pepperoni, and then cheese. And it was kind of weird to us, like, ay, pedazo de pan and it has cheese. And I'm not used to eating that. So I think it was like my uncles were like graciously, taking us out, taste pizza. And then here we're all like, no, I don't want to try it. Very, and we're small, so we're probably picky eaters anyways. But then being exposed to new food and being like, I'm kind of not ready to try it. It looks different from the typical food I am used to. And I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
So shout
Mm-hmm.
out to the Antonio people for those memories that
Mm-hmm.
they gave us. Because later on we enjoyed pizza, and they even sometimes they offered us pizza from Antonio's at Hanara. There were certain days, from what I recall, and I remember I would always give the pizza to my friends that they gave us because obviously at that point I didn't like it, or I thought
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it. I didn't. I don't think I gave it the opportunity it deserved to be tried. But I remember I would always give it to my friend, and she was happy. She got 2 slices of Antonio's pizza, and I was like, no, I'm fine, I'm good. And so that was
I
the food.
feel like mi tía Gina also talk about like Taco Bell and the exposure of tacos here in the US.
So yeah, allá in Mexico, we're used to like Mi Tío Chuy's and other people who sell tacos, and few select places. Some are like established. You walk in and it's an actual establishment, or some are little casitas hechas como de metal.
Like
And
a
it's a con. small business, cita de la coca, ¿verdad? Allí. And then they're gathering places. Los tacos in Mexico, they're gathering places. You see people, vas a cenar, you sit down, you see people coming in and out, and you're ordering food, la plática es la fiesta. Ah, vamos a cenar y luego venimos al bailungo. These are things that they're part of that tradition. Tacos in Los Guerrero are very delicious, as they are in other places in Mexico. And here they say Taco Bell. I'm like, oh, Taco Bell. I envision, okay, vamos a ir a un lugar y luego las tortillas de maíz y todo. Te imaginas what you lived in Mexico. So here you
Mm-hmm.
come to Taco Bell, and again with the burritos, porque apparently I love my burritos when I was small. They were like, oh, hay tacos dorados, hay tacos suaves, and I don't think we understood what those meant. And we were looking at the menu, and I was like, pues un burrito, that's a safety net for me, right? Un burrito, and I'm like, quiero dos burritos. And because obviously in Mexico, they're made differently. And so over there, apparently two was a good amount for me. And so my uncle was like, Mija, talking about Mija, right? Mija, we're gonna start with one burrito, and if you're able to finish that one burrito, then I'll definitely order you the second one. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, that's a deal, you know? And so when we got our food, those burritos were big. I was definitely not gonna finish even one because they were stuffed with other ingredients that our
Yeah.
burritos in Mexico they're not really stuffed with, at least the ones from our town. They're more like con frijolitos, con carnita, con vegetales, con tu chilito, y
Hmm.
están enrollados en la tortilla de harina. And here, yes, en la tortilla de harina, but you have rice, beans, and in great amounts. So there was definitely a size difference, and I could understand, okay, Theo, I wasn't even able to finish half of it, probably. I understand what you meant, but once you finish your first one and you want some more, then we'll order. And the tacos look different. Taco Bell
Mhm.
tacos, the hard shell, not the same as your tacos dorados de las kermeses de México, con la
Mhm.
papita, con el vegetal y todo. Here los tacos dorados se miran muy diferentes. They're different. And even the
Mhm.
soft tacos, they're different. They're ground beef and they have the yellow cheese. In Mexico, usually we don't have yellow cheese. That's how we were like, oh man, the food here is different. Of course, in our house,
Mhm.
we made our homemade food the way we grew up with. But once you go out into the community and to the restaurants, that unless you even the Mexican food in what they call authentic Mexican restaurants is not as authentic as you would cook it at your house. And so that was a big
Mhm.
like eye opening moment for us.
Yeah, I remember I've gone to Mexican restaurants también where I have to ask if the flautas is what we call them, flautas o taquitos como los llaman aquí. I have to ask them if they're flour tortillas or corn tortillas before I order them because sometimes they will make them out of flour tortillas. And I was like, that's not how we usually make them. And also, like Taco Bell's soft shell tacos are flour tortillas. That's not the original.
Interestingly enough, my first job was at Taco Bell. As
Yeah.
my first job was Taco Bell. I was 14 years old when I had my first job, and it was my first day at high school, but the first day that I started working at Taco Bell. So it was double the nervousness, right? And my first big job, and my first right big girl going transitioning to high school. So that was that experience with Taco Bell. And yeah, so those were the stories of being here in the United States and definitely not knowing, okay, I'm still thinking the way I thought in Mexico, that things were the same. School is not the same, food is not the same, the language not the same, the way you drive is not the same, the way you dress is not the same. And so you kind of begin this assimilation process where you're like, well, I want to be myself, but I know that I have to adapt to this new life here. And it's not leaving your identity behind. It's how can I incorporate this new process, new identity, new information? How do I process this into the way I am used to living? And,
Mhm.
it's a journey that is different for everyone. And because of the experiences, this is our own unique experience. And my experience is different than your experience because we were
Mhm.
different age and what
Yeah.
we experienced at that time.
Mhm. All right. Well, I think the plática is real good. The stories are real good. But I think for now we're gonna stop here and continue next time. But again, thank you for tuning in and new episodes on Wednesdays and follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Our podcast is available on YouTube and Mija, let me tell you, grateful and thank you for being here and thank you for tuning in. And please share your stories. We love sharing stories about our childhood and we'd love to hear your stories as well. Con gratitud, this is Mija, let me tell you.